And they have this sentence that describes, they say, good programmer, I say lazy programmers. If I know I do an 80-hour a week and I can save 5 minutes of my day every day from now on, I will do it in a heartbeat. I'm always interested in finding the cheapest way to increase productivity, and hence you see my laptop setup. Much to the chagrin of my wife, I strap on my external hard drive with Velcro, and I have 3 terabyte storage on this bad boy. So. And that's my workstation. I am up to 5 monitors now. Park and left. So when I was working with him, I was at 4, so I'm breaking my own record. I want to show this a little bit. That's our current cube as of 3 months ago. So in the demo, I'll show you a slightly smaller one. 2 minutes into my application, into my presentation, I'm still talking about me. I am currently 1.5 years at Cadillac Solution. It's a little company down just across the highway. We have our star DBA here in the audience, Tim Cronin. I have a blog, but that said, I haven't updated in a year, so I'm a first-time presenter. So I would love a feedback. I'd like to know how I'm doing and what other things you would like to know from my topic. 1 hour is very short time to cram everything in, so let me know what else you would like me to show you. I would love to do this again. I run this presentation as a test run with my kids last night, so I'm getting through them some of the cube concepts, but their feedback mostly was like, your slides are too green. And so here's everything I want to cover today. I want to talk about cube processing options, tools we use, and then getting to partitioning. I want to talk about the solution we can build to use to manage and process those partitions. There's I call it a Cadillac version, and there's a Hungry Man version. So introduction of the cube. The previous Kevin did all the hard work, so I'm not going to talk too much into it. He did an awesome job. I think folks agree to that. He has asked these questions, so I'm going to move on. Now, what is a cube? Again, he covered it. But he covered it from a very, very academic point of view. Talk about dimension and all those things. So the way I envision it is I have little pieces of data with hundreds of hands that are just holding flags, and then the overlord comes over and say, which one of you have a green triangle flag? Raise your hand, and then count them up and answer the question. That's how I envision it. Anybody else use that? One of my mentors said this to me, and I've always remembered. Think of cube as a very specialized file system to store data for faster aggregation. And when you actually get into the cube and see how the file is stored, it does look like it. Is the cube dying? And this is a question I've always had to answer 2012, 2013, but with tabular version coming out, with the previous Kevin presented it right back, I hope you guys have your answers. Like, there is a lot of value in the cube. I like the cube pretty much for the same reason Kevin does, is you build a relationship in the back end, you deploy it, your end user doesn't have to know MDX, doesn't have to know SQL. They just drag and drop. You get all the answers they're looking for. I mean, there are companies that I know that one of their requirements to hire financial analysts is you have to know SQL. I don't know whether that's good or bad. So cube component, again, haven't covered, awesome, so I'm going to skip. So now, once you build your solution, you have to fully process it before you can use it for the first time. So, full processing cube. So the way you start with the cube is from data source, data source view, grab the table, and then build a relationship for the cube. I have seen one person who wrote a PowerShell script to build cube from scratch. I'm going to try that. So this is a Hyper-V environment I set up. Kind of, I've got a nice here. The first time you do it, you fully process. You can process solution. You can process your cube. Just for fun, and this. So this, I basically downloaded the eventual work data warehouse version and loaded on my SQL, built a cube on top of it. So while that's running, now once you deploy the first time, then the subsequent time you can go to your Management Studio and then process. The reason I like that is it doesn't tie up my workstation, tie up a Visual Studio process and hog 300 meg of my memory. So, this is what happens when you try to hack things and use Windows authentication to process your data. Okay, so once you deploy it, you come here, and then you can go to the database and process the individual cube if you want. But again, that's full process. Full process is very clean. Even if we get into incremental processing, you have incremental processing on your production. The best practice is always, when you get a chance, do another full process just to make sure everything's kosher. The time takes a long time. I mean, I've seen cube that needs 6 hours to do a full process. Our current cube, our company right now, we're down to about 15 minutes, but even that is too long for me. So you can script out your cube processing. Do that. You deploy from Visual Studio, you have your database, and then next time you go to Management Studio, you process. So there's a little flag. Like they process cube, you can change settings. So there are a lot of settings. So during daytime, you want to limit this process, otherwise the DB will come here and kill you. But you can script it out to a new curved window. And the language is XMLA, and that's what it looks like. And you can script out at the measure group level, you can script out dimension, the update, you can script out a lot of things. But with this, you can set up a SQL job with the XMLA command, and then do it from the job. If you look at that script, if you do it this way, everything is hard-coded to the ID. Every object in that cube has an ID. So that's the limitation of using XMLA. There are a couple of dynamic ways to do SSIS PowerShell. I'm sure there's other ways, and I'll talk about that later. You can, from SSIS or PowerShell, you can access the object method directly, or you can have your SSIS or PowerShell go to the ID and then build out the XMLA, and then execute the XMLA later. The PowerShell script I use is from this gentleman, this is Vita Dallas, and website sas.info.com. Sorry, sas-. There are some considerations we want to take into before we dive too deep. If you have full processing, like my Adventure Cube, is 3 minutes. I keep forgetting. So this one, I'm clicking run and process. It'll be done in very short. So if you do this every day, it takes 2 minutes out of your ETL time, why do you bother? If your cube only has measures with distinct counts, there is also no point because distinct count doesn't care about your partitioning. If you run an MDX query, even limited to data from last week, and then you open up your source monitor and watch the system I/O, you'll see it goes through every partition. I don't know why, but it does that. So in these two scenarios, there's no point for you to do partition. But if your cube is so small that you cannot answer the pertinent questions of your company, and I've seen places where people write this query with 15 table join, and then they put that in their source view, and then they stood up a cube and have SSRS hit a cube and say, I built a cube. Please don't. For the rest of us, we want to build a cube that are big, that have shared dimensions, that can answer questions that have one measure. For example, in our company, we're trying to answer questions like my labor deployment against my claim, against how many people am I sending offsite, and all these things. If you need to answer those type of questions, you need to build a complicated cube. Then performance is a consideration. That's why we're talking about partitioning. The performance has two sides. One is the read time, your report processing time, and the other one is the actual partitioning processing. So we do incremental processing, then you need to partition. The partitioning between SQL and Cube is slightly different, but share a lot of similarities. In SQL, you have a single column you use as your partitioning function marker. So you have your partitioning function, you have your partition scheme. There's no way for you to duplicate the data. You get a row with that data, it just knows which partition it goes to. Don't have to worry about that. But you cannot partition against multiple columns. So the way I know I used to hack it is you build a composite key, right? So I can have my region key times 2 billion and then add my day key or whatever. But cube partitioning is completely up to the user. You have complete control on that query binding on your partition. So it's very, very easy to have duplicated data. And believe me, when I first started partitioning Wizard, and that's the first message it tells you, is say, be careful of duplicating data or missing data. And I say, yeah, I know that. And next thing you know, it's like, hey, what did you do to the data from last week? We're getting zeros across the board. So keep that in mind. So cube partitioning, when you go to that wizard, there are 3 properties you can set. You can set the storage, set the data source, you can set the aggregation. So I'm going to go to a measure group that I have not created partitioning before. So first thing you start out with this wizard is that's your group. So you can choose. So 2016 is smart enough to find out the underlying table and also show that. But I usually connect it to a view layer. That way I can control the data coming in. I can control my table hints. There are other reasons why I like the view layer. But you basically specify query, you put in your word clause. Okay, so here, first you can specify the storage location. You can change the folder it goes to. So if you have a physical server with different disks, you can have your partition point to different disks and then increase the disk speed. But if your cube server is already on a send array, and then in the back end it's got some kind of array set up. No point changing. You can change this the location, processing location. You can change the data source. You can say, okay, my Eastern region stores, I'm going to hit my Eastern region cell server instead, the server on my company location. And I can also set custom aggregation. I can say I only want to have specialized aggregation on the data within the last year. So all my partition that pertains to last year, I'm going to have a custom aggregation, and then I'm going to set all my historical data to have no aggregation. You can do that. So these are the properties that you can set. Now storage is kind of like SQL because you can specify the primary file group, or you can specify your own file group. But the other two, I have not seen SQL be able to do that. So power is in our hands. We can really create so many partitions that for every question is just going to hit only the partition that we need. So that comes with a cost. So yes, with smaller partitions, we have better query performance. But it's also very difficult to manage to make sure you get the segregation right. If you don't get the segregation right, and you say, oh, I have duplicated data, imagine going through 500 partitions and going to find out where did I set my query where clause wrong, right? And our processing time is also more hit to the underlying table. So if your underlying table or view does not have the proper index set, you're doing table scan on every one of your reads, you're going to create a deadlock for yourself, and again, your DB is going to come and kill you. I keep looking over at Tim's employee expression. Also, this one bothers me the most, but may not bother a lot of other database developers. I am a heavy TFS user. I keep my database project in TFS. I keep Cube in TFS, SSIS. But if you don't use source control, it may not be a problem. So to me, we need to find a balance. We need to break it down to have just the right amount of partition to have the acceptable performance and have the easiest way to manage. I'm always up to find the cheapest way to solve a problem. So let's talk about the tools that you can use for partition processing. If you look at the partition, they're all .NET objects. So anything that can access the .NET framework, you will be able to process it. So I have not tried F#, but in theory you can. It's just there are a lot of examples out there with PowerShell and SSIS. So the difference between PowerShell, I'm going to show a PowerShell script, but before that, I'm going to show what it looks like. You script out every partition of your measure group in your queue, and you try to use XMLA. That's the script. I have not used this script in probably a year. This is Vito's script. So he's going through in here. He also take out some of the properties you can set on top. You can set your parallel process to any number you want. You can set your measure group update to process full. You can do your dimension as full as well. But this is a very awesome script. It was very easy for me to understand. you see here, I just commented out the dimension part. So this is a script I use to process the measure group. And that's part of the process of measure. I'll get to it at a later time. Now, this is the code that you need to know to add a partition. So there's a difference between processing a partition and add and maintain a partition. So in here, it basically goes in there and say, here, clone an existing partition. This is a PowerShell method. So it clones a partition, it changes the ID name, it changes the source query definition, and then goes update the queue. Okay, so this is the PowerShell way. And this is the SSIS way. This is a C# method. So it goes in there, it finds it by name, it drops it, it recreates it. So regardless of what you do, once you change the existing partition, you need to process it later. So just keep that in mind. So this is a Cadillac Solution that I've tried to build. I think it works for a period of time. I've also inherited a couple of these. The problem is I have never seen one that really runs 3 years without any failure. Just throw it out. But the idea is this. You have one SSIS manage the partition. And this usually runs at night. I'll get to it. And you have another SSIS package that processes partitions. So the one that manages partitions, you need a table to track all your partition layout. So your table needs to track your measure group name, track your partition name, and if you want to use name, different name and ID, you can even separate out those columns. You need to track the source query you're using. That includes all the warehouse, like I want days last week. You need to track your approximate row count, because that's one property on partition set. I usually throw in the flag to say, this particular one needs processing. I'll talk about that in a bit. I also throw in this date range to, it's not date range, it's data range. It's for me to match which part of my data coming out of my ETL has changed, so that I can come back to this table and say, okay, which one of these partitions do I need to process? So it needs to run in 2 modes. One is just create new partitions. So we have this solution that goes in there and just say, hey, today is Sunday, so I need to create a partition for next week. That's all it does. Does that every Sunday. If you have a monthly one, if you have different ones. Most of these I'm talking about is date, but you also might have create one for if you find a new product, if you want partition by product, if you want partition by region, if I get a new sales region, you want to do those as well. And the second mode is a tricky one, which is an alignment mode. Alignment mode will get you, will say, go through your table and then look at all your existing partition and say, do I have a name match? If I have a name match, then here's the decision you need to make is, do I assume the query has not changed? Or do I say, I don't care, when I run in alignment mode, I'm just going to assume something changed. I'm going to rebuild these partitions, set my query definition straight, and then mark them for processing later. So what's the date range you need to go back? Do I go back? Do I need to process my data every 6 months? Do I only need to process last week's data because 7 my sales is done already? This is the part that always gets. In a Cadillac solution, you also need to merge partitions. So if your reporting only goes back to a year, you don't want to have a weekly partition on any data that's more than 2 years old. You want to be able to consolidate those. So the problem is to be able to find those weekly partitions, delete them, create your yearly partition, and then move on. I always create new partition and delete the old one, and that's the tricky part. I've seen solutions where they just go find one and then rename, and those are the ones that usually break. So I don't suggest that. So for the processing part, if there's a way you can know from your ETL output which range of your data has changed, you can even have that mark your partition tracking table and say, today, at the end of my ETL, I only need to process these 5 partitions. Tomorrow when I come back, I have data change. Somebody changed my data for the last 3 months, so I'm going to have to process all those partitions. But on a daily basis, you might only need to process 2 partitions. You might need, if you're in retail, you might only need to process this week and last week. So this is what I call my ETL data updated time, and versus my cube partition primary date range, which is a data range that I keep tracking my table. If we can get this to work, it's awesome. It's going to give you the best performance on your query time. It's going to give you the best processing time. It's just a lot of extra work to manage that partition and keep everything straight. It's doable. I know it's doable. So we have to make sure we have to make sure we get it right. So this is a pain point when it doesn't work. So I'm looking at Pelican, not that he broke it. By the way, Pelican is an awesome DBA that I had the pleasure of working with. So we had this experience. We had a analysis services with a not big enough hard drive, a physical server. So there's no way for us to parallel process the cube and then do the backup. And we can't really process it on test and restore it over because then we break our licensing agreement. The existing Cadillac solution works. It creates that partition every week. But one thing we found out was once we were tasked with changing the customer age group. Okay, we got to change that from an integer to a decimal to be able to report more granular on our data. So the solution was not in sourcing, so we had to grab it from our production environment, load it into Visual Studio, do our change, and come back. And once we deploy it, and this is where we get a question saying, what did you do to our last week's data? Because it took us like a little more than a week to get the change done. So I say, okay, so story from backup for last night. And then do the same thing at test, write out every step you've ever made to the queue and the data in the bag, go back, and then figure out when that Cadillac solution runs to manage partition, load the cube the next day, do all your changes. And you can't do it during the day because remember, this is a cube that took 6 hours to fully process. Do it on Saturday, do a full process, and meanwhile, you have all these backups running. You have network failures. They're like, see all the white hair in my hair? So if we don't get it right, that's the pain we're going to cause. And kudos to Mike, we fixed all the problems. So these are some numbers to think of. We have 5 measure groups. They're all on weekly partitions. And data goes back 10 years. We had to manage 2,500 plus measure partitions. So that got me thinking why I move on to my next adventure is, what if I can make my partition smart enough to know the data it needs to know, that I never have to create a new partition. I just have this thing just runs and knows how to get the right data. So this is what I call a hungry solution. So I ask these questions on my new job. Say, okay, so how far back can the data be changed? 12 months. What's our reporting level? Let's say monthly. Awesome. We have calendar days. We don't have physical days. Not that it's not doable by physical day. It's just that physical day you have to go back to your dimension table, make sure everything is. You have to do a lookup every time you process a new partition. It's doable. It's just that our new date dimension has a primary key in the format of year, month, day. So in any of my queries, I don't have to look at that date dim table. I can just calculate my date based on the date. And this is very important. Okay? At retail, I mean, we have to be on call Christmas and New Year's. But I mean, my new place, nobody works on January 1st. Because the solution I have, when the year switches over, then all your partitions switch over. So all of them need to process. So that's why January 1st, you have to do a full process and just know during the business hours, everything is going to be slow. And this is probably the most important point. Because full processing, the problem is it takes so much time. You always have network failure, you have database lockup, all kinds of things always happen on full processing. So this is a solution I came up with. So you see here, all I did was this. I say I'm partitioning against my current year, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and then you can even say this is 3 years or older. At my current job, I have 6 years or older. So we don't care. We don't really care about data as 6 years or older. So this is all you need to do to the query. I'm getting my order date key. I'm calculating what year is it, and because my primary key is set up like that, well, if your primary key is not set up like that, all you need to do is do an inner join on the date dimension of both lines. But it's looking at the beginning of the year and the last day of the year. So at my 1 year, 2 years, current year, I can even go down to quarter level, and then at my current job, I have it down to the month level. There are measure groups where I don't care about the partition. For example, if this one is only distinct count, I don't care. I just leave it alone. But if you want to include that in your current in your daily queue processing, you have to make sure that the naming convention of that partition name falls into the one that you're looking for. Okay, so if this runs in our company's production environment, this one will be named with the underscore current year. Okay. So now, the advantage of using PowerShell and SSIS is there's a method you can say, go get object by name. If you script out XMLA, you have to also make sure that your ID matches the one. So, case in point,
Can't you do that if you're not creating new partitions all the time, like your Cadillac version?
Sorry?
In my case, the partitions are already set; their IDs aren't changing. The dynamic SQL to trick it into getting the new data I want. Doesn't know what hit it, and it just stays the same. So I just do the simple XMLA once everything's finally set, and do a SQL job to, process each of the dimensions, and that way I can have it process the dimensions in the right order, which SSAS doesn't do necessarily. You have to know.
You bring up, that's a great point. Okay? So that solution would, because if you throw everything in XMLA script, you throw everything in, you have no control over the processing order. That's the way to get around it. But in your scenario, what happens when you add a measure group?
I redo all the XMLA. I don't write any XMLA. I just trust it and run it.
Right. So if you have a way to go through instead of using XMLA, you go through that little snippet, because you can fit in the partition name, and you just go look for that name and it goes process. So you can use that table. You can actually hook that right into the table output you're going to get, and then go process. You don't have to have it spit out XMLA.
Yeah.
So this one, if you guys can see, this one I just take, when you create a measure group, it automatically gives you a partition with that back table name. So that ID is not switched over here. With SSIS Solution and PowerShell, you don't have to worry about this. But if you use XMLA, you need to make sure your partition naming is set up correctly. So you would never go to a partition and go rename the existing one. You always create a new one, delete the one you replaced. So now I have my partition set up. I will run the script. So all I did was I took Vitas' script and I add in this part. I say my part name has current year or 1 year ago in it. I process. Otherwise, I don't care. So I run it, and this is the output. So you can see here, it's processing current year, 1 year. It's skipping 2 years, 3 years ago. It's skipping the one that don't have those year marks. It is processing the one that I don't have my ID set right, because it's getting by name. So I like this solution because when the year switches over, I have to do a full processing. But I have some partition that's a monthly partition that goes to the beginning of the month day. So I just say, the year, and then I grab 0101 to 0131. So that's how I do my monthly partition. Yes, I did write that stupid thing 12 times, but I don't. I mean, that took me 10 minutes to do. Then now I have a monthly partition. I have this script, and now my cube is processing. My incremental processing of the cube is now at 30 minutes. The problem with that is I have not separated out the dimension update yet, but that passes the time. My original version was I calculate the last 12 months. So instead of going to the beginning of the year and last day of the year, I calculate the last 12 months and I say, okay, the day before that and then 12 months before that, that's like 2 years ago. I really did that. The problem I ran into is I have to do a full processing every month on the first. And you have people trying to close, screaming at you. And some measure group, I found out later, is it's got data way into the future. So I got a current year partition that's 4 times the size of all the other ones. So here's another question you have to be careful. You talk to your end user and they'll tell you, yeah, our reporting is at month level. Great. So then you get the reporting requirement. It's like, I want to see my weekend appointments. Huh? then you're not talking about month level, you're talking about day level. Those are the things that, the previous Kevin said, you have to know the grain of your queue. You have to make sure you get that right. I also did last 90 days on one partition. That was a hell because you have to process that every day. So what are the benefits of partitioning our data? Reporting, we go MDX query, it goes to disk, it comes back much faster because it doesn't have to read through 20 gigs worth of file, it reads through 2. But if you have a tabular and that thing's already in memory, how much faster do we get? And that's only also initial hit. Your subsequent hit, your data is already cached. Does it really matter? What about queue processing? If I process the entire group, that's what it gives. I'm talking about current year, but in my solution, I'm really processing sometimes even 23 months, right? If I really have a weekly partition, yeah, that really cuts down on the data. But if I'm only at 1 hour and now I cut it down to 30 minutes, is that really a big gain? And of course, I wouldn't say all these things if I'm still talking about the topic. So I want to come out of queue partitioning and talk about, because your queue partitioning is at the end of your ETL process. So how many of you have this in your company, the ETL process? The job fires up at some date, at some time, 3 a.m., go through dimensional data, go to business area A, see this a long way until you get to your queue process. And if you're unlucky enough to go into an area where the source failed and your process doesn't have count check, how do you recover from that?
You run it all again?
You run it. Well, you run it from this part. Well, hopefully you can isolate out this part and just run that. But you got to do this over. Right?
Is this schematic assuming you have to process each business area A through G differently?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, this is a really bad example I'm showing. So hopefully, your eventual ETL goal is this. Your business area A is ready. You're doing dimension first, doing your facts. Done, right? So if you build out your ETL process, you might have, say, start at 3, and instead of going linear from business area A to business area B, I can say this clock controls that, or this chain somehow. And if you really work on it, you say, hey, when is my business A source data ready? Can I start off on that clock instead? You can even change it to your source staging process, right? That way you don't have to worry about clock. You don't have to worry about contention. If you use clock, you also have to check whether your source process is finished. But what this allows you to do is this. When my business A process dimension is done, I can kick off my queue dimension update. And that's something I currently don't have in my production environment. I'm working on that. But if you can do this, see right now, my queue processing, yes, I'm doing incremental, but my dimension update takes up 10 minutes at the beginning, right? Because it's not doing that update, it's also doing all the effective measurements. So you're doing it twice. But if I can do this, I can do a dimension, I go process my queue dimension update, and while in the SQL Server, my fact ETL is running, when that's done, I go process the partition. And eventually, people come ask you, how fast can you get ETL refreshed? I only should worry about the last leg, the one that finished the last. And I should only worry about what are these 4 components. I shouldn't have to worry about this. So if you have partitioning, this is what you just enable your organization to do, is you really cut down on that time. Well, in addition to your ETL change.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Go back to that slide.
Sure.
Aren't you possibly in trouble? I don't really only have one business. There's shared dimensions across all levels.
Mm-hmm.
So I do the dimensions and then the dimension updates as one job. And if that job succeeds, I do the facts and the facts processing. But you don't have a connection here. See where you have BA, A cube, dimension updates? If they haven't finished, you better not do the MG part one, right?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. That's an oversight. I should say this is area B. Sorry.
No, I didn't mean the type.
My kids didn't catch it.
Just look at the first ladder.
Uh-huh.
Your third box down there?
Right.
To the left, to the left of that.
Okay.
That guy is to finish before your 4th box. That box.
Good.
Maybe it's so fast you can always guarantee that, but
Good
I've
point.
gotten in trouble with that.
So if I get a chance to come back, I would love to talk about ETL framework. I love that thing. So great point. What needs to be done at any of these levels? If I have a check over here to say whether my source A is done, I need to have a check here to say whether this is right. And if I have dependency from the B dimension to the A dimension, I also need to build in a dependency check. So the ETL framework that I've been part of, there's a table that tracks all of the packages and processes you need to run, and there's actually a mapping table to track the dependency. And every day you come back and they and say, you know, my dependency finished, and I finish. Once it's finished, you go say which one can start. So yes, that would be an awesome ETL solution. I mean, there's this place I was at, we were building out that ETL framework. Our mandate was we want to get this ETL processing done every 15 minutes. From the IBM DB2 server with like 60 or 70 gig data, we got close. Okay, so in addition to helping your ETL, the cube partitioning. So imagine you're in retail, and again, this Pelican could attest to this. We had the mandate to say we need our sales data to the store by 7 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the store opens. The problem is that we also have stores on West Coast that closes at 2 a.m. And any sales made before 2 a.m. counts as the previous day, so you have to include all that data. So your system is ready a little after 4 a.m., and you have to do your entire queue and entire ETL and queue processing all done by 7. So imagine we had done that. Imagine we had partitioned our queue by the region of our stores. Then I can say, at 1 a.m. St. Louis time, my East Coast stores are done. Run my ETL process, get my sales data, and then go back to this architecture and go refresh my Eastern region sales partition. Done. Right? Then I wouldn't have to, I mean, we developed the process to like text us at 3 a.m. in the morning if any process fails. And then that was, Pelican and I rotated through that code for how long, man? A year?
Wow.
So if we had done that, we wouldn't have this problem. Again, this is pain. Another thing it allows you to do is, I'm sure you've all had this request as business to say, we want to see real-time data. Totally different discussion, go back to your business and say, why do you need it, and what do you get out of it? What are you going to do with this midday data? Are you going to act on it? Are you going to give discount? Different question. But imagine we can say, I can create a partition for day. I can even change that storage to say, instead of a MoLab that I have to process, I can even connect real-time to my source. When they really need real-time data, I can have that query, and they go over, they query one-day data. Not a big deal. I can even have that partition say, okay, MoLab, I don't want to hit it real-time, but I can set up a process that runs every 5 minutes. Another scenario is, if your queue processing fails in the morning, everybody is pounding on your door and say, where's my report? Would you rather say, give me 30 minutes, or would you rather say, give me 6 hours, I'll get back? Right? So this is a roadmap I see for this partition. When you first started out, you grab 3 measures, 10 dimensions. Full processing takes 10 minutes. Just go to your database, script out the processing, XMLA. Don't do anything else. As your cube gets bigger, try out the Incremental solution, right? Specify the date, you automatically reload, grab the PowerShell script from Vita's website. Done. Make sure you separate out the distinct count measures. But as your cube takes the shape of enterprise and you have 30 measure groups, 50 measure groups, and 100 dimensions, you really need to think about taking a stab at that Cadillac solution. Because I guarantee you, your partition needs to go down to the lowest level that you can possibly manage. That usually means by a week level. The month level probably won't work anymore.
Actually, in my case, the day level, because you have to think beyond what they think are the requirements. So a few weeks later, they'll come back and say, I want to go from the 15th of last month to the 16th of this month. And your month and your week have just gone to hell. Yep. They're no good.
Yep. So before you decide to do this, make sure you ask these questions of your business users. How far back data changed? They might tell you 12 months, they might tell you 3 months. Always build a little cushion for yourself. And what's your reporting date range? We have days. Ours is at month level right now, but what's the business separation needed for your reporting? For example, if we set the example I gave, if we had separated out the region on the partition, it will make our life so much easier. What are the dates that you can miss your reports? So know that answer and build your processing accordingly. Is there any benefit on real-time data? As a data warehouse guy, I always say no, but it depends on your business. So that's it. I want to take 2 minutes. I want to say that this is a very humbling experience for me to stand here where like Dan Guzman and Kathy Thornburg has stood and give this talk, whether you guys like it or not. But because you guys keep coming, because of the hard work of Julie, Phil, and Gary, I've been coming here for the last 5 years, every chance I get. My wife was doing her PhD, but I was able to come here and keep up with the latest and greatest. So thank you for all the work you guys do. And without you guys, I mean, it'll be, I don't know how many hours we're able to spend to keep up with the industry. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
We appreciate the lecture, and then everybody, you know, you're part of the user group too. Here's Kevin, stuff that's in the presentation. Keep that in mind. You know, if there's something that you would like to present, and if you have opportunities where you can short